If you have ever sat in a room full of people who share your last name but treat you like a stranger, then you know exactly how the air feels. It is heavy, suffocating, and smells faintly of expensive floral arrangements and insincerity. That is how the air felt on May 14th at the Colony Club under the vaulted ceilings where my family had held court for 3 generations. We were gathered for what my father Preston called a strategic realignment announcement, which is corporate speak for a coronation. The sunlight streamed through the high-arched windows, illuminating the crystal goblets and the silver cutlery that had been polished to a blinding sheen. There were 200 guests in attendance, senators, real estate moguls, old family friends whose net worths were whispered about in hushed reverence, and the board members of the Sterling Group, the conglomerate my grandmother Augusta had built from the ground up in 1958. I sat at table 4, the table designated for extended family and friends, while my parents and my younger sister Cynthia sat at the head table on the dais. The symbolism was as subtle as a sledgehammer. My name is Meredith. I am 48 years old. I hold a master's degree in art history and a secret certification in forensic accounting that my parents never bothered to ask about. To them, I was simply Meredith the soft-hearted, the daughter who liked libraries more than boardrooms, the one who was too fragile for the cutthroat world of high finance. My father stood up, tapping his champagne flute with a heavy gold spoon. The room fell into a respectful silence. Preston was a man who wore his authority like a suit of armor. At 72, he was silver-haired, tanned from winters in Palm Beach, and possessed a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice boomed, practiced and resonant. "Today marks a new chapter for the Sterling Group. For 50 years we have been a beacon of stability. But the future belongs to the bold. It belongs to those with the vision to take what we have built and expand it into empires we haven't yet dreamed of." He gestured to his right where Cynthia sat. She was 42, radiant in a tailored cream Chanel suit, her blonde hair coiffed into a perfect, immovable helmet of sophistication. She looked every inch the CEO in waiting. "It is my distinct honor," Preston continued, beaming with a pride he had never once directed at me, "to announce that the board has unanimously approved the succession plan. Effective next month, Cynthia will assume the role of Chief Executive Officer, and upon my retirement at the end of the year, she will inherit the controlling voting trust of the family estate." Applause erupted, polite, enthusiastic applause from people who knew which side of the bread was buttered. My mother Lillian dabbed at her dry eyes with a linen napkin, looking at Cynthia with adoration. She didn't look at me. No one looked at me. Why would they? In the narrative my parents had constructed, I was merely a footnote, a trust fund beneficiary who needed to be managed, not a participant. I stared at my plate of untouched salmon. The humiliation wasn't the announcement itself. I had known for years they favored Cynthia. The humiliation was the public erasure. By giving Cynthia the voting trust, they weren't just promoting her, they were legally cutting me out of the family legacy entirely. They were ensuring that I would remain a child forever, dependent on an allowance, voiceless in the company that bore the name of the grandmother who had raised me when my parents were too busy social climbing. "Meredith, dear," a woman across the table said. It was Mrs. Vandermeer, a dreaded gossip. "You must be so relieved, Cynthia taking on all that heavy lifting. It leaves you free to, well, what is it you do again, volunteer?" "I read, Mrs. Vandermeer," I said quietly, taking a sip of water. "I read everything." "How quaint!" she dismissed, turning back to the stage where Cynthia was now speaking, her voice crisp and devoid of warmth, talking about trimming the fat and modernizing assets. I felt a headache blooming behind my temples. I needed to breathe. I stood up as unobtrusively as possible, smoothing the skirt of my navy dress, a dress my mother had called dowdy earlier that morning, and slipped out the side door toward the cloakroom. I told myself I was just going to splash water on my face, but deep down I knew I was fleeing. I was 48 years old, and I was running away because the weight of their disappointment was finally too heavy to bear. The cloakroom at the Colony Club was a quiet sanctuary of mahogany and velvet smelling of cedar and old fur coats. The attendant was on break, leaving the room empty. I leaned against the counter, closing my eyes, listening to the muffled applause from the ballroom. It sounded like the ocean, distant and indifferent. "Miss Meredith." The voice was scratchy like dry leaves skittering across pavement. I jumped, turning around. Standing in the shadows of the coat racks was a man I hadn't seen in nearly 15 years. He was leaning on a cane, his suit cut in a style that had been fashionable in the late 90s, hanging loosely on his frame. "Mr. Whitaker," I breathed. He stepped into the light. Arthur Whitaker. He had been my grandmother Augusta's personal attorney, her confidant, and the man my father had unceremoniously fired the week after Augusta's funeral. My father had called him a relic. "I wasn't sure you would come out," Mr. Whitaker said, his eyes sharp and alert despite his age. "I couldn't get past security into the ballroom. Your father has a very short memory for friends, but a very long list of people he excludes." "What are you doing here, Arthur?" I asked, moving closer. "If Preston sees you—" "Preston is too busy congratulating himself to notice a ghost." Whitaker chuckled dryly. He reached down and lifted a battered brown leather briefcase from the floor. It was scuffed at the corners, the brass buckles tarnished. My heart stopped. I recognized that briefcase. It had sat on the corner of my grandmother's desk for as long as I could remember. "Augusta gave this to me 3 weeks before she died," Whitaker said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She made me swear an oath. She said, 'Arthur, keep this safe. Don't open it. Don't let Preston near it. And certainly don't let Lillian see it.'" "Why?" I asked, my hand trembling as I reached out to touch the worn leather. "She gave me specific instructions," he continued. "She said, 'Deliver this to Meredith only when the family formally announces they are pushing her out.' She knew this day would come, Meredith. She saw it coming 15 years ago." I stared at him. "She knew, but she loved Preston. He was her son." "She loved the company more," Whitaker corrected gently. "And she knew your father's character better than anyone. She knew he was a steward, not a builder, and she worried about what he would do when he felt his power slipping." He pressed the handle of the briefcase into my hand. It was heavier than it looked. "There is a reason your father has never been able to sell the commercial division, even though he's wanted to for years. There is a reason the bylaws are so convoluted." "What is in here?" "The truth," Whitaker said. "And the key, the combination is your birthday, not the year, just the numbers." He looked toward the ballroom door as the applause swelled again, a standing ovation for Cynthia. "They think you are weak, Meredith. Augusta knew you were just patient. There is a difference." "I don't know if I can do this," I whispered. "Look at them, Arthur. They have the board, the banks, the lawyers. They have the appearance of power," he said, stepping back into the shadows as the sound of footsteps approached the hallway. "You have the mandate. Go home. Open the case. Read every page. And remember what your grandmother used to tell you about how to read a contract." Read the silence between the clauses, I thought. That was what Grandma Augusta used to say. The devil isn't in the details. He's in the definitions. "Go," Whitaker urged, "before they find you." I grabbed my wrap, clutched the heavy briefcase against my chest like a shield, and slipped out the service exit into the bright, blinding afternoon sun. I didn't say goodbye to my parents. I didn't congratulate my sister. I hailed a cab and gave the driver my address, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs that felt suspiciously like the drumbeat of war. My apartment on the Upper West Side was quiet, a stark contrast to the cacophony of the club. It wasn't the penthouse my parents thought I should live in, but a sensible, light-filled pre-war flat filled with books. I locked the door, bolted it, and carried the briefcase to my dining table. I sat there for a long time just looking at it. The leather smelled like her, like lavender and tobacco smoke. My hands shook as I dialed the combination, 0412. April 12th. The latches clicked open with a satisfying snap. Inside, there were no stacks of cash or jewels. There were 3 thick-bound documents and a black notebook. The first document was yellowed with age, typed on a typewriter that punched the letters deep into the paper. The cover read, "Original Articles of Incorporation, The Sterling Group, 1958. I opened it. I had seen copies of the corporate charter before my father had them framed in his office. But as I turned the pages of this original, I noticed annotations in the margins in my grandmother's distinctive, spidery handwriting. And then I found it. Article 12, Section B. In the version my father operated under Article 12 governed the distribution of dividends. But in this original notarized and countersigned by the state clerk in 1958, Article 12 was titled, "The Founder's Protection Clause." It read, "In the event that the direct lineage of the founder attempts to transfer majority control without a unanimous vote of the founding shareholders, the voting rights of the Class A shares shall not transfer to the heir, but shall revert to a dormant trust until such time as a designated guardian invokes their activation." I stopped breathing. A dormant trust. I reached for the second document. It was a trust agreement dated 2 days before my grandmother died. The Meredith Sterling Preservation Trust. I read the legalese, my forensic accounting training kicking in. The words stopped swimming and organized themselves into a clear, terrifying picture. My grandmother hadn't left the company to my father. She had left him the usufruct, the right to enjoy the profits and manage the assets, but she had never transferred the ownership of the controlling voting shares. She had placed them in this trust, naming me as the sole beneficiary to be activated only upon the event of an attempt to disinherit or disenfranchise the beneficiary. My father didn't own the throne, he was just keeping the seat warm. And by announcing he was giving the company to Cynthia, by explicitly excluding me, he had triggered the clause that stripped him of his power and handed it to me. I opened the black notebook. It was a diary. The last entry was dated June 2009. My dearest Meredith, if you are reading this, Preston has done exactly what I feared he would. He has mistaken net worth for self-worth. He views you as weak because you listen more than you speak. He favors Cynthia because she is loud and mirrors his own vanity. But a company is not a mirror. It is a vessel. It needs a captain who understands the currents, not just how to polish the brass. I have watched you, my darling. I watched you organize your father's chaotic ledgers when you were 20. I watched you defuse that union strike in 2005 with coffee and conversation while Preston wanted to call the police. You have the steel, Meredith. You just keep it sheathed in velvet. Do not be afraid of them. They are children playing dress-up in my clothes. You are the one who knows how to weave the fabric. Take back what is yours, not for greed, but for protection. If Cynthia takes the helm, she will sell the soul of this company for a spot on a magazine cover. Don't let her. Love, Augusta. Tears fell onto the page, blurring the ink of her signature. For 48 years, I had believed I was the mistake of the family, the slow one, the disappointment. But Grandma Augusta hadn't seen a mistake. She had seen a safeguard. I wiped my face. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I looked at the third document in the briefcase. It was a dossier of financial records from 2008 to 2023, meticulously updated by someone. But who Augusta had been dead since 2009. I looked at the handwriting on the recent notes. It was jagged, forceful. I recognized it immediately. It belonged to the only person my father hated as much as he hated Mr. Whitaker. Muriel. At 7 a.m., the next morning I walked into the lobby of the Kensington, an assisted living facility that cost more per month than most people earned in a year. It was where the wealthy of New York went to wait out their final days in luxury. I found Muriel sitting in the solarium smoking a cigarette that was strictly forbidden by the facility rules. She was 84 with hair dyed a violent shade of red and eyes that looked like burning coals. Muriel had been the CFO of the Sterling Group for 30 years until my father fired her for insubordination, which was code for refusing to cook the books. Well, Muriel rasped, not looking up from her crossword puzzle. The prodigal granddaughter returns. I heard about the little circus at the Colony Club yesterday. Did you enjoy the show? I didn't stay for the encore, I said, pulling a chair opposite her. I was busy reading. I placed the briefcase on the table between us. Muriel stopped writing. She looked at the briefcase, then at me. A slow, terrifying grin spread across her face. Whitaker actually gave it to you, she cackled softly. I told him he was too sentimental, that you'd never have the guts to open it. You updated the files, I said. Even after you were fired. How? I have friends in payroll, darling, and I know where Preston hides his skeletons. He thinks because he uses digital servers now he's safe. He forgets who built the filing system. Muriel stubbed out her cigarette in a crystal saucer. So do you know what they've been doing? I have suspicions, I said. But I need you to confirm them. I opened the dossier. Preston and Cynthia are liquidating the pension fund reserves, I said, pointing to a column of figures. They're categorizing it as asset reallocation to bypass board approval, and they're funneling the money into Project Zenith. Project Zenith? Muriel spat. A high-rise luxury complex in Dubai that has been stalled for 3 years. It's a money pit, a vanity project. Cynthia convinced him it would make them global players. Instead, it's bleeding the company dry. If they proceed with the transfer of power, the first thing Cynthia will do is sell the Brooklyn Logistics Hub, the heart of the company, to cover the losses from Dubai. The logistics hub is the only thing generating real cash flow, I said, my mind racing. If they sell that, the company collapses within 18 months, Muriel finished. The employees lose their pensions, the shareholders lose their equity, and the Sterling name becomes a joke. She leaned forward, grabbing my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Preston isn't just greedy, Meredith. He's desperate. He's leveraged to the hilt personally to fund Cynthia's lifestyle and his own gambling on the futures market. They need this transfer to happen so they can access the untouchable capital. They're robbing the house before they burn it down, I whispered. Exactly. Muriel sat back. So the question is, Meredith, are you going to let them? You were always the nice one, the quiet one, the one who apologized for taking up space. I looked at the documents. I thought about the 4,000 employees who worked at the logistics hub. I thought about my grandmother building an empire in a world of men, brick by brick. And I thought about my father's laugh when he announced Cynthia's name. I'm not apologized anymore, Muriel, I said, my voice steady. I need you to come with me. To where? To the board meeting, today. I'm banned from the building, she grinned. Not anymore, I said, closing the briefcase. I'm the majority shareholder, and I'm hiring you as my personal advisor. The Sterling Tower rose 50 stories above Midtown Manhattan, a monolith of steel and glass. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. on the 50th floor. The agenda was a formality, ratification of the CEO appointment. At 9:55 a.m. I walked through the revolving doors. I was not wearing my usual beige cardigans or sensible flats. I was wearing a black Armani suit I had bought that morning, sharp, architectural, and imposing. My hair was pulled back in a severe chignon. Beside me, Muriel moved with a surprising speed for an octogenarian, her cane clicking rhythmically against the marble floor like a metronome counting down to an explosion. The security guard at the desk, a man named Henderson, who had worked there for 20 years, looked up. He started to smile, the pitying smile he usually reserved for me. Miss Meredith, good morning. Are you here to see your father? I think they're in a closed session. I'm not here to visit Henderson, I said, not breaking stride. I'm here to attend. I can't let you up without a pass, miss. The list is strictly board members only. I stopped and looked him in the eye. Henderson, do you remember who paid for your daughter's braces in 2012 when the insurance claim was denied? He blinked, taken aback. You did, Miss Meredith. And do you remember who ensured your pension was vested early before the 2015 restructuring? You did. Then trust me, I said softly. You want me in that room, because if I don't go up there, there won't be a pension for anyone next year. Henderson hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then he pressed the button to unlock the express elevator. Good luck, Miss Meredith. The elevator ride was silent. Muriel checked her lipstick in the reflection of the brass doors. Showtime, kid, she muttered. When the doors opened on the 50th floor, the receptionist gasped. I ignored her and marched straight to the double oak doors of the boardroom. I could hear my father's voice inside. And with this vote, we secure the future. All in favor. I didn't knock. I pushed the doors open with both hands. They swung inward with a heavy thud that silenced the room instantly. 12 heads turned. My father Preston stood at the head of the table. Cynthia was seated to his right, a glass of sparkling water in her hand. My mother sat in the corner observing. Meredith? Preston frowned, annoyed but not yet alarmed. What on earth are you doing? We are in the middle of a vote. Wait in the lobby. No, I said. The word hung in the air, simple, absolute. Excuse me, Cynthia laughed, a nervous tinkling sound. Meredith, honey, you look intense. Is everything okay? Did you forget to take your anxiety medication? My health is excellent, Cynthia. Thank you for asking, I said, walking to the foot of the table. Muriel limped in behind me and took a seat in an empty chair, crossing her arms. Security, Preston barked, his face reddening. Get Muriel out of here, and get my daughter a car. Sit down, Preston, I said. I didn't shout. I didn't raise my pitch. I spoke with the exact cadence my grandmother used to use. The room froze. The board members, men and women who had ignored me for decades, looked from me to my father. You are out of order, Preston sputtered, gripping the edge of the table. You have no standing here. You hold 0 voting shares. Actually, I said, placing the briefcase on the polished mahogany table and snapping the latches open, I hold 51%. This is absurd. Cynthia stood up, smoothing her skirt. Dad, she's having an episode. Look at her, bringing Muriel here. It's sad, really. The only thing sad here, Cynthia, is the balance sheet for the Dubai project, I said, pulling out the financial dossier Muriel had prepared. I slid it down the long table. It spun and came to a stop in front of Mrs. Gertrude, the longest-serving board member. Gertrude looked at the cover, then up at me. She adjusted her spectacles. What is this? Preston demanded, reaching for the file. Don't touch it, I ordered. Again, the authority in my voice surprised even me. It wasn't my voice. It was the truth speaking through me. That file documents the unauthorized liquidation of the pension reserve to cover losses in personal speculative investments made by Preston and Cynthia Sterling. Gasps rippled through the room. Lies, Preston roared. Slander, I will sue you for everything you have. You can't sue me with money you don't really own, Father, I said. I pulled out the yellowed Articles of Incorporation and the Preservation Trust document. Article 12, Section B, the Founders' Protection Clause. I held up the document. This is the original charter. Not the amended version you filed in 1998, but the original controlling document. It states clearly that upon any attempt to disenfranchise a direct heir, which you did publicly yesterday, by assigning the voting trust exclusively to Cynthia the founder's shares, revert to the designated guardian. I paused, locking eyes with my mother in the corner. She looked pale, her hand covering her mouth. I am the guardian, I stated. As of yesterday's announcement, the trust was triggered. I now control the majority vote of the Sterling Group. That's a forgery, Cynthia spat, losing her cool composure. Grandma was senile when she died. She didn't know what she was signing. I thought you might say that, I said. I reached into the briefcase and pulled out a small digital voice recorder. It was old, one of those chunky models from the mid-2000s. Grandma Augusta recorded her meetings, I told the room, including her final meeting with Mr. Whitaker. I pressed play. The sound of static filled the room, followed by a voice that made my father flinch as if he'd been struck. It was Augusta, raspy, tired, but unmistakable. Arthur makes sure the clause is watertight. Preston is my son, and I love him, but he has a hole inside him that no amount of money can fill. He will try to turn this company into a monument to himself. And Cynthia is just like him. She breaks things she doesn't understand. The recording continued, the dead woman's voice echoing off the paneled walls. Meredith is the only one who cares about the foundation. She checks the mortar while they paint the facade. When they try to push her out, Arthur, that is when she will be ready. Give her the power then, not a moment before. I clicked the recorder off. The silence in the room was absolute. She didn't trust you, Dad, I said softly. She loved you, but she didn't trust you with her life's work. And she was right. Preston sank into his chair. His face had gone from red to a terrifying shade of gray. But he wasn't defeated yet. He was a narcissist, and narcissists never go down without trying to rewrite reality. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. This is a performance. A very good one, Meredith. I applaud you. He looked around the table, making eye contact with the board members he had handpicked. Can't you see what's happening? My daughter is unwell. She has always been jealous of Cynthia. This document is likely something she mocked up. And that recording, digital manipulation. It's too easy these days. He stood up, regaining his height and his bluster. Meredith, I am going to forgive this outburst. I am going to let you walk out of here, and we will get you the best doctors money can buy. We will send you to that retreat in Switzerland. You're tired. You're confused. Cynthia jumped in, playing her part perfectly. She walked around the table, reaching out to touch my arm. Her eyes were wide with faux concern. Mary, please, you're embarrassing yourself. Mom is worried sick. Look at her. I looked at my mother. Lillian was trembling. Meredith, she whispered, please stop this. Just apologize to your father. For a moment, the old Meredith wanted to surface. The Meredith who wanted to please them, who wanted to be a good daughter, who terrified of conflict. I felt the familiar urge to shrink, to fold, to admit that maybe I was crazy. Then I looked at Muriel. She was watching me, smoke-stained fingers tapping the table. Then I looked at the portrait of Augusta hanging behind my father's head. I am not confused, Father, I said, stepping away from Cynthia's touch. And I am not going to Switzerland. I turned to the board. Mr. Henderson, the head of security, has the original notarized logs of the recording. Mr. Whitaker is in the lobby with the original hard copies of the trust ready for forensic analysis. And Muriel here has the bank routing numbers for the transfers to the Dubai accounts. I walked over to the whiteboard at the side of the room. I picked up a marker. Muriel, what was the eBuy TDA for the last quarter if we remove the false projections from Project Zenith? Negative 12%, Muriel answered instantly, down from a positive 8% the year prior. I wrote minus 12% on the board in red ink. And what is the current liquidity ratio? 0.8, Muriel said, technically insolvent. I wrote 0.8 on the board. You are bankrupting this company, I said, turning back to face my father. You aren't worried about my mental health, Preston. You're worried that I'm the only one sober enough to see that the ship is sinking. I turned to Cynthia. And you're not ready to be CEO. You approved a vendor contract last month for the new headquarters interiors that was 400% above market rate. The vendor is owned by your husband's shell company. Did you think I wouldn't catch that? Cynthia's jaw dropped. The color drained from her face. How did you? I told you, I said coldly. I read everything. The atmosphere in the room shifted. The gaslighting had failed. The facts were on the whiteboard, stark and undeniable. I looked at Mrs. Gertrude and Mrs. Blanche. They were sisters, both in their late 70s, who had been on the board since Augusta's days. They had always been kind to me in a distant way, but they had voted with my father out of habit and fear. Gertrude, I said softly. You were there when Augusta laid the first brick of the logistics hub. You remember what she said about debt. Gertrude looked down at her hands. Never borrow more than the foundation can hold, she murmured. My father has borrowed against the foundation to build a castle in the sand, I said. If you vote for Cynthia today, you are voting to foreclose on Augusta's legacy. You are voting to fire 4,000 people in Brooklyn so my sister can have a ribbon-cutting ceremony in Dubai. I walked over to Blanche. Blanche, you gave me a book on Renaissance architecture for my 16th birthday. You told me that a structure is only as strong as its weakest joint. Look at this board. Look at the deception. Is this strong? Blanche looked at Preston. She saw the sweat beading on his forehead. She saw the desperation in his eyes. She saw the guilt. We have a duty, I said, addressing the whole table. Fiduciary and moral. I am asking you to honor it. Preston slammed his hand on the table. I am the chairman. I demand we proceed with the vote as planned. I have a motion, Mrs. Gertrude said. Her voice was shaky at first, then it grew stronger. She stood up. She was a small woman, but in that moment, she looked like a giant. I move to suspend the confirmation of Cynthia Sterling as CEO, Gertrude said. And I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in Preston Sterling as chairman pending an external audit of the financials presented by the majority shareholder, Meredith Sterling. I second the motion, Blanche said, staring straight at my father. You can't do this, Cynthia shrieked. We are family. This is business, Cynthia. Muriel drawled from her chair. Sit down. All in favor of the motion? I asked, assuming the role that was rightfully mine. Gertrude's hand went up. Blanche's hand went up. Then one by one the other board members, seeing the way the wind was blowing, and perhaps remembering their own legal liability, raised their hands. 8 hands. A supermajority. The motion carries, I said. My father slumped into his chair, a man deflated. The air seemed to hiss out of him. My mother was weeping silently in the corner. Cynthia was furiously texting someone, likely her lawyer or her husband. The board members looked at me, waiting for the execution. In corporate takeovers like this, the next step was usually brutal. Security would be called. Boxes would be packed. Humiliation would be public. I looked at my father. I remembered him teaching me to ride a bike before he decided I was too clumsy. I remembered him paying for my college even if he mocked my degree. He was a flawed, greedy small man. But he was my father. And I remembered what Grandma Augusta wrote, take back what is yours, not for greed, but for protection. I am appointing myself interim CEO effective immediately, I announced. Muriel will be reinstated as CFO to oversee the audit and restructuring. I turned to Preston and Cynthia. However, I am not firing you. Preston looked up, confusion warring with hope in his eyes. You are fired from the C-suite, I clarified. Preston, you are stripped of your chairmanship and your executive powers. You will have no access to company accounts. However, you will retain the title of Founder's Ambassador. You will attend charity galas. You will shake hands. You will be the face of our philanthropy, but you will never make a business decision again. I turned to Cynthia. And you. You wanted to lead, fine. I am assigning you to the Brooklyn Logistics Hub. You will serve as the assistant manager of operations. You will report to the floor supervisor. You will learn how this business actually makes money. How boxes are packed. How trucks are routed. How the people you wanted to fire pay their mortgages. You're making me a warehouse manager, Cynthia gasped, horrified. That's below me. If it's below you, then you can leave, I said calmly. But if you leave, you forfeit your trust fund. The choice is yours, earn your keep, or walk away. It was a punishment worse than firing. Firing them would have made them martyrs. Keeping them in reduced roles forced them to confront their own incompetence every single day. It was mercy, but it was a cold, sharp mercy. Do we have an understanding? I asked. Preston looked at me. For the first time in his life, he didn't see his disappointing daughter. He saw the woman who had just outmaneuvered him. He saw Augusta. Yes, he croaked. Good, I said. Now clear the room. I have work to do. 6 months later, the office on the 50th floor looked different. I had removed the heavy dark velvet drapes my father loved and replaced them with sheer linen that let the light flood in. The portrait of Augusta still hung behind the desk, but I had moved my father's massive oak desk out and replaced it with a round table. I didn't want to rule from behind a fortress. I wanted to work with my team. It was late afternoon. The audit was complete. We had saved the pension fund. We had sold the Dubai project at a loss, but we had stopped the bleeding. The stock price had dipped initially, but it was now climbing steadily as the market realized that the Sterling Group was back to its roots, boring, stable, profitable real estate. My intercom buzzed. Ms. Sterling, your mother is on line 1. I paused, looking out the window at the Manhattan skyline. The Empire State Building was glowing gold in the sunset. Lillian called once a week now. She was adjusting, she said. She was trying to bridge the gap. But the gap was 48 years wide, and you can't build a bridge over that kind of distance with a few phone calls. Tell her I'm in a meeting, I said gently. I'll call her on Sunday. Yes, ma'am. I wasn't punishing her. I just didn't need her approval anymore. That was the real victory. It wasn't the CEO title. It wasn't the millions in shares. It was the silence in my head where their voices used to be. I picked up the black notebook, Grandma Augusta's diary, which now sat on my desk. I opened it to a blank page. Dear Augusta, you were right. The view is better from here. Not because I'm above everyone else, but because I can finally see the horizon. We are safe. Love, Meredith. I closed the book. I picked up my pen. And for the first time in my life, I went to work not as the daughter of Preston Sterling, but as Meredith. Just Meredith. And that was enough. We often spend our lives waiting for permission to be great. We wait for our parents to say, "Good job," or for the world to say, "You belong." But sometimes the people who are supposed to hold the door open for us are the ones leaning against it to keep it shut. If you are the quiet one, the slow one, the one they underestimate, don't let their silence become your story. Your worth isn't in their applause, it's in your resilience. What about you? Have you ever had to prove your own family wrong? Or are you still waiting for your moment? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one.